back there. There's a McLot there. Get chairs from over there. See, send the guys to get chairs from the classroom in the back there. You can bring the chairs down to the bottom. You can go against the wall. Don't block it totally. Guys. Either go against the wall or bring it down here. Make sure that people can walk. Against the wall. Make sure we still have a walkway there. No eating or drinking in here. Seriously, we do not have permission for that. Please, no eating or drinking in this room at all. You need to eat something, go out into the hallway. All right, guys, we're running behind schedule here. The Holy Taman is getting cold. That wasn't a joke. Yeah, what? Chairs in the back room there. All right, guys, that's it. Okay. You know that you've been doing something a long time when you literally can't remember how many years you've been doing it. Rabbi, how many years have we been doing this? It's a lot. Rabbi Orlofsky has been a part of our Emunah Day. With the exception of the year you skipped us by almost dying. But outside of that, you've been pretty consistent. One of the ways when we deal with Emunah, we deal with the practical of Emunah. The technical is very easy. Shh, find your seats. Believe, you get it straight. But when there are difficulties, and when there are persistent difficulties in our lives, lives of people we know, that's when you find out where your Emunah is. That's where the tests are. That's the building blocks. It's so much about what you learned before, and that's going to help you then, the more you prepare for it. And then there's so many different attitudes depending on the situation. One of the most important attitudes you need to have for difficulties to be used appropriately is humor. The Rabbi Shalom has a sense of humor. You see it in the Torah over and over. The Gedolim, anybody who knows it with Neventhal, anybody who really hears and listens, pays attention to Yichah, he has a very good sense of humor. You listen to the question and answers, you're paying attention. Some of them you could tell that he's just laughing inside when he says it. And you get that smile that he gives. So besides for the Torah and the perspectives that we're going to get, there's also somebody who knows how to teach us a little bit more how to laugh when it's appropriate in the face of difficult times. Rabbi Orlofsky. You want more? I can. Noted author, speaker, lecturer,
Listen, we could go on all day. Thank you very much. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, though it ended a little abruptly for me. But Rabbi, as Rabbi's pointed out, we've been doing this for a lot of years. And yeah, don't worry about it. They'll hear me. Yeah, that's not a problem. I was one time screaming at my kids, and that night I was supposed to be giving a shir on Chinuch Banim, and I had lost my voice, and I said, I lost my voice preparing for the shir. I was screaming at my kids. But anyway, so I've been doing this for a whole bunch of years, and usually the Emunah day is one long day. They bring you here from early in the morning, they keep you here till late at night, and there's a lot of different speakers and a lot of things. So they always would put me on at the end because there was nobody who anybody would listen to after a full day of this except for me. Thank you very much. So, but now it's no big deal because they broke it up over a whole bunch of days. So, you know, what can I do? Except for the people who are exhausted because they were watching a football game, everybody should... Listen, you were there with Trump, so that's okay. Don't worry about it. You know, you were doing your political duty. But anyhow, so we'll do the best we can to gain some insight. Now, let me explain to you what I want to do. There is a big problem when it comes to suffering. I like to use the term suffering because, you know, the way most people put it is, what do you do when bad things happen to good people? I don't care about when bad things happen to good people. I'm worried about when bad things happen to average people like me. You understand? I'm not a big tzaddik, and when things go wrong, I want to know why. And I don't want a philosophical insight that'll explain things to me. I want a practical approach. What do I do when things go wrong? And it stretches my faith, it pushes my emunah, it makes it hard for me to function. I need a practical approach. And that's it. And I try to be as practical as I can. That's always been my approach in life. You know, I came from a traditional Jewish family. My parents worked Shabbos, but you know, we went to Shul Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We had the electric menorah in the window on Hanukkah. We had a Passover Seder. So we had all those things. And when I decided to become more observant and take on a bunch of things, when something hits you, it challenges you. You're wondering, what am I doing this for? What's the point? So I want to try today, with the time that we have, to approach it from a practical point of view, and I'll share personal insights that I myself have dealt with, because everybody has challenges. Anyone who tells you that they don't, it's just because you don't know the whole story. We don't know what's going on in Yenem's house. How many times have you seen families where you think it's the perfect family, you know, and then after 25 years, the parents get divorced? It turns out that there was fighting and terrible things going on the whole time. You never knew. And you suddenly find out that someone's got some terrible illness that they kept quiet the whole time, and then people are shocked. You know, you don't know what's going on. Everybody has what we call in Yiddish their pekala. Everybody has their little package of difficulties they have to deal with. And I'm going to try to give, like I said, a practical approach. I'm going to take 3 approaches that I have found helpful in my own life, and hopefully you will as well. So let's start with a few assumptions. The first assumption is there's a God. If there's no God, then why do bad things happen? Because we live in a random universe and nothing makes any sense. X number of people are going to get hit by lightning. Some of them are going to be eating a ham sandwich, and some of them are going to be davening mincha, and it doesn't make any sense. The world is absurd. So when you see that bad things happen and you ask why, you're assuming there's someone in charge. You also assume that he's all-powerful. Because if he's not all-powerful, then, gosh, he would have loved to have helped, but he just couldn't. You know, as Woody Allen said in the movie Love and Death, I don't think God is evil, I think he's an underachiever. That's this argument. The argument is God would like to help, but he just can't. Now, it sounds like a slightly crazy idea, but there is another very popular religion who says this exactly. I remember the Oklahoma City bombing back in the 1990s. This minister got up to speak and he said, people ask, how could God have done something like this? The answer is, God didn't do this, Satan did. Well, that's great. You have a good God, you have a bad God. The bad God did it, not the good God. It's a little hard for us. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Midas Harachamim, Elokeinu Midas Hadin, Hashem Echad. We only have one God. And Christianity has to deal with this that way. A lot of contemporary philosophy today comes from two sources, the Far Side and Calvin and Hobbes. Now, I don't know if they still print these things. Calvin and Hobbes, both of them are named after philosophers, by the way. So Calvin, who's this little kid who should be medicated, has this large tiger doll who may or may not exist. It's not clear if Hobbes exists, but only Calvin can see him, or it's a figment of Calvin's imagination. Sam Waterston wrote a whole essay on this, and he concluded that the question of Hobbes' existence is too difficult for us to answer. So I'm not going to get into that. But one time he's talking to Hobbes, and he says, I was in Sunday school, and I said, why does bad things happen? And the teacher said, it's because of Satan. So I said, why doesn't God stop Satan? And he says, he can't. So I said, you mean Satan is more powerful than God? So she said, Satan is part of the plan. I said, you mean God is in cahoots with Satan? And the last panel is, I was the first kid excommunicated from Sunday school. You understand? I pushed it too far. But that's how they deal with it. They have a good God, they have a bad God. We don't have that. We have one all-powerful God that he can do anything he wants. The third assumption is that he's all-knowing, right? There was a book that came out in the 80s that was a bestseller, put out by a conservative rabbi named Harold Kushner. The book was called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. People think it was called Why Bad Things Happen. It's not. That's part of his thesis. You don't know why. We'll never know why anything happens. But what do you do when? And his argument is basically, God's busy, he can't be everywhere. Can't deal with everything, you know? And that famous story at the end of Eov, where God appears to Eov after all of his suffering. And he appears in a whirlwind and he says, do you bring in the tides? Do you bring in the sun? Do you control everything? Meaning, the stuff you don't understand. Harold Kushner rewrites this as God whining. Do you do this? Do you do that? No, I got a lot on my plate. So you fell through the cracks. I think that's an absolutely horrible approach, but there are people who take this approach. I've seen it written up by people. So we assume there's a God. We assume he's all-powerful. We assume he's all-knowing. And we assume he's good. Because if he's not good, then you say, why do bad things happen? Because he's got a sick sense of humor. Right? So that's just terrible. So if God is good and all-powerful and all-knowing, then why do bad things happen in my life? That's the question. So we're going to take three approaches. The first approach is the following. And like I say, there's nothing here I'm saying that's not in the Rishonim, not in the Chazal. All of this, I'm not breaking any new ground here. I'm just trying to present it in a way that I have found helpful. The first thing we have to ask ourselves is, maybe it's not bad. It looks bad, but maybe it's not bad, right? A guy's been late for work a whole bunch of times. Boss tells him, you come late one last time, you're fired, okay? He oversleeps, as unfortunately has happened to him too many times. He gets up, he runs for the bus, he misses the bus. You know, he finally gets there really late, and he tries to make it look like he was there already. He takes off his jacket, loosens his tie, you know, has his coffee already, walks in backwards, figures he won't notice. You know, the boss is waiting for him. Says, that's it, you're fired. So he says, no, but boss, it wasn't my fault. I missed the bus. Fired. No, but I got a wife and kids. Fired. Fired. Oh, man. So he packs up his stuff, and he walks outside, and he sees the headline, the bus that he was supposed to have made blew up. So he thought it's the worst thing that ever happened to him. It was the best thing that ever happened to him. Now, what about the people who are on the bus? I'm not talking about death. Death is another whole class. We're not talking about that today. If you die, then I have a different class for you. But if you're still alive, that's what we're dealing with, you know? So okay. So he thought was the worst thing. Now, okay, most people who get fired is not because the bus blew up, right? But you find people are stuck in a dead-end job, and they know they should make a change, but they don't. And then suddenly they get fired, and they go on and get a much better job, and they have a happier career, and things change for them. So sometimes you look at something that's bad, and it turns out to be the best thing ever. And everyone, I'm telling you right now, everyone can do this in their own life. So for me, I told you the kind of family that I came from. I had a Rabbi in 8th grade, and he was very persuasive, and he basically convinced me that Torah was true. Now, you ever hear these stories about people go away for a beautiful Shabbos, they meet a nice family, they decide to become frum? Not me. I went kicking and screaming. I basically realized this is true, and since I always considered myself intellectually honest, if it's true, I knew I had to do it, which was just terrible because I was in a school and nobody in my class was frum, really. And I said to my friends, we have to fight with this guy. They said, just ignore him. I said, but what if he's right? They said, ignore him anyway. And I didn't know how to do that. And I would argue with him. I spoke to conservative rabbis. I spoke to people. I got all kinds of questions. He just answered them off. I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh no, I have to become frum. So I started my process, and I basically took on everything. But like many people who get frum and the people around them are not frum, you're basically a Marano. You know, you light the candles in the basement, you pretend that you're not really frum, you know, you mumble a bracha, you know, whatever you can do to hide the choices in life. Now, at this point, until I became frum, I was actually popular for the first time in my life, the last time in my life. I was a real nebby kid. I was always picked on. But I had managed to become cool by becoming antisocial and, you know, doing all kinds of terrible things, and that helped. And so I was the leader for the Geo presidency. You know, we had a great thing, Dio for Geo. It was great. I was all set, you know. And the Sunday before the whole thing was supposed to start, I was playing running bases with my brothers. Now, I'm one of 6 boys, of whom I'm the quietest. If you know my brothers, you'll know I'm not exaggerating. So we were playing running bases, and I slipped, and I fell on my ankle, and I heard it go crack. And the pain was beyond description. Now, I come from a family that's very dramatic. I heard one of my sister-in-laws saying, Orlofskys are never sick, they're always dying. They never have a headache, it's a brain tumor. You know what I mean? It's like, whatever it is, we all tend to be a little overdramatic. So I'm lying there, crumbled in a heap, and my brother says, get up. And I said, I can't, I broke my leg. You know, so okay, so they kept playing, but now you had to jump over me. You know, fine, they left me on the lawn. Eventually, another brother came home, everyone was talking, and he sees me crumbled on the lawn, and he says, what's with David? He says, he's faking. He says, well, you know, maybe it's for real, let's help him in. So they bring me into my room. My mother, who's, of course, used to us already, you know, so she says, what's wrong with you? I said, I think I broke my leg. So he says, why didn't you empty the dishwasher first? I said, I didn't know I was going to break my leg. And he says, all right, your father's going to come from work, he'll take you, you know, to the hospital for x-rays. So my brother comes in and he says, listen, I once wanted to get out of gym class. I pretended that my arm was broken. And Dad took me to the emergency room, had to pay for x-rays. When he found that I was faking, he beat the daylights out of me. So you better make sure it's broken. I was like, oh my gosh. So my dad comes home, he says, all right, we'll go to the hospital. I said, no, I'm fine, because we'll take x-rays. No x-rays, you know. So they bring me into the emergency room, and they wheel me in, and the guy walks like a quarter of a mile away, gets on the microphone, there's nothing to worry about. I said, then why are you there in the lead-lined room and I'm over here with this machine from Dr. Frankenstein, you know what I mean? Anyway, they take pictures. I'm there a whole night. Finally, 1 o'clock in the morning, he looks at it and he says, oh, wow, your ankle is broken. I said, oh, thank God, you know? My father says, are you crazy? I said, forget it, Dad, you know. Now, this guy, who's there on a Sunday night, you know, some intern, you know, he's always wanted to do a cast. He never did a cast. My ankle is broken. He put a full leg cast from my foot all the way up to my hip. I could not bend my leg. I had to lie across the back of the seat. A lot of other things were difficult that I won't go into now, but you can use your twisted imaginations. But anyway, So I get home, I can't go to school. So now the other guy who was running figures he's got a chance. It became the dirtiest campaign. Everything was just terrible. So I'm hobbling around with these crutches, you know. Now, I had never had crutches before. It never occurred to me to check the little rubber tip on the crutches, because apparently they can wear out. I didn't know about this. But anyway, it was a whole week. I couldn't go into school. And finally, Fridays were the speeches. I had gone to a real orthopedic. He cut this down to just like a half a cast. He said it was the most ridiculous thing he ever said. I said, fine. I wrote my whole speech. I was coming in on my crutches. I was going to say I've suffered for my people. I had a whole great speech. It was all set. That Friday morning, the little rubber tip wore out, and when you put a wooden crutch on a wooden floor, it flips out from underneath you, and I fell to the ground. So instead of going in to school, I went back to the orthopedic, had to get another x-ray, and I lost the election. Now, 8th grade boys on the evolutionary scale are beneath hydras. So when I finally came back the next week, everybody had abandoned me. I was a pariah, and I had no friends left. The only 2 friends I had were the other 2 frum kids in the class. In retrospect, at that particular moment, if I had a button to push and pop out of existence, I would have done it. My life was over. I was a pariah. It was terrible. But because I ended up not winning the election, I fell out with all the cool kids. And now I was left with the only 2 frum kids in the class who were willing to still be my friends. I ended up going to a frum class. The fact that I'm a frum Jew today is probably because I lost that election. But at the moment, I thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. So every one of us knows of things that have happened in our lives where we think it's the worst thing in the world, and then afterwards it turns out to be the best. But sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you don't know. Says the Gemara in Brachos. Moshe Rabbeinu says to God, I want to see you. Now, if I was God, I would have said, come on, Moshe, you're a smart guy. You can't see me. I'm invisible. But that's not what Hashem says. He says, you can't see my front. You can see my back. Gewaldig. So God passes before him, and Moshe sees his back. Now, luckily, the Gemara in Brachos helps. He showed him the knot of his tefillin. Apparently, God has a very, very big pair of tefillin, and he showed him the knot of his tefillin. What? This doesn't make any sense. Or, since I taught seminary for 20 years, that's like so random, yeah? So, I speak girl. Anyway, so, what does that mean? So, what it means is, the Gemara says, the Gemara explains, Moshe wanted to know why bad things happen. He says, you're not going to understand when they're happening, but after they're over, you can look back and understand it. Only in retrospect. And that's why he showed him the knot of the tefillin. I once heard Rabbi Moshe Shapiro explain, because when you see somebody wearing tefillin, you see 2 straps in the front, but you don't know where they're coming from. If you see the knot in the back, you understand the source. So afterwards, you can look back and understand where things come from. But when you're in the middle of it, it doesn't make sense. As my daughter, who suddenly got locked out of every high school, she was a good girl and she was a smart girl, and it just one thing after another happened. And she said to me, Abba, what does Hashem want from me? And I said, when it's all over, I'll tell you. Right now, I don't know. At the end of the story, I was able to show her the tremendous siyata d'shmaya that she got locked out of all these places because she ended up getting into a better high school, and everyone in the school that she was going to went and petitioned on her behalf. It was a tremendous covet she received. But I couldn't tell her at the time. I didn't know what was going to happen. You don't know how things are playing out until they're over, and then you look back and you say, now I see why that happened. So every one of us has bad things that happen in our lives that afterwards we look at it and we say, now I can understand why that happened. Okay. So I look at this and I say, I don't understand how this is good. And even if you tell me it's good, it's not that this is a bad situation. I'm in pain. I'm suffering. And there's no question about it. There's real pain. I have 11 kids, 8 girls. That's the reason I became an international speaker. Anyway, it's the only chance I have to get the bathroom to myself is when I'm in another country. But anyway, we go to the doctor a lot, you know. With a lot of kids, people are always getting sick. And one time this kid was complaining about aches and pains, and the doctor said, now this guy has graduated from Harvard Medical School, so he's not a dummy, you know. He says, it's growing pains. And I said, come on. He says, no, really. I said, I'm looking at their chart. They suddenly had a growth spurt, and they grew to the point that their body is hurting them from having stretched so fast. We all talk about growing pains, but it's evidently a medical condition. You could suffer from growing pains. If you want to be somebody special, sometimes you're going to have to go through a period of preparation. You go to the army, so you know you got to go through basic training. And they're going to make you run, and they're going to make you jump, and they're going to make you this, and all kinds of endurance things. Why? Because when you're on the battlefield, you're going to have to be able to, bring in all of that training that you're being given. So sometimes in life, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is putting us through growing pains so that we can appreciate what our job is to do. We need the skills. I'll give you a simple example. Someone who's never had any problems in their life, so when they see somebody else in pain, they don't even understand it. They don't know what it means because they've never had any pain. They never had any suffering. Whereas a person who never has hurt and suffered a lot. Rabbi Yochanan used to carry around the tooth of his 10th son who died when he'd go to be Menachem Ovel, and he'd say, I know what you're going through, because he understood their pain. And we may not want this, but I'm going to teach you something that's going to help you in life. Sometimes people come to me for a bracha, and I give them a simple bracha. You should be matzliach, have whatever you need in life, be happy. I give them my mother's bracha. I wish for you everything you wish for yourself, Chaim Kanievsky would just do bracha v'hatzlacha. That was it. After a while, that was too long. He would shorten it, Rashi Tevos, bua. So a person said, can I have a bracha? He goes, bua. That was it. One time a guy raised a lot of money for one of his tzedakahs, and he says, Rabbi, I'm hoping I could get a bracha. He goes, bua. He says, I raised a lot of money. I was hoping for a longer bracha. So Chaim goes, bua. But sometimes people say to me, no, I want a real serious bracha. And I'll sometimes tell them that you don't. I said, no, I really do. I said, okay, if I think you can handle it. Yeah? The bracha is, you should have the insight to figure out what your purpose is in this world, and then have the courage to pursue it. Because most people don't want to do it. And very often we know what we're supposed to do, and we just don't want to. It's too hard. I'm going to tell you an uncomfortable truth, because you're young yet and you have your life ahead of you. Don't listen to what people say. It doesn't make a difference what people say. Watch what people do. Words are cheap. People say things, but it doesn't mean anything. So you'll find parents who tell you, the most important thing in my life are my kids. You spend a lot of time with them? No, I'm busy making money for my kids. But you don't spend any time with them. No, what about when you come home? Yeah. Really? Or do you read the newspaper and check your email and sit on the computer? Your kids are the most important thing to you, but look how a person lives their life. See what you do. I'm not interested in what people say. And there are people who say to me, my avodas Hashem, talking about frum Jews, my avodas Hashem, most important thing in the world to me. But see how they live their life. Because if you see how they live their life, basically they make money and spend it on themselves. I don't care what people say. And you find that people, I was speaking once in the White Shul, and it was right after Super Bowl Sunday. And there's a restaurant there, a very fancy restaurant, and they have for Super Bowl Sunday $1,000 sandwich. I asked them, how do you make a $1,000 sandwich? Because, you soak the meat in 25-year-old scotch, and then, you put it on a gold plate, and you sprinkle gold. I don't know, they keep pushing it up until they come to $1,000. And he says to me, and they told me that on Super Bowl Sunday, they sold 8 sandwiches for $1,000. And then he looks at me and he says, we just had a parlor meeting for Tomchei Shabbos to raise money for people who can't buy food. They didn't give $1,000. But for themselves, they bought themselves a sandwich for $1,000. So I don't care what people say. But if a person wants to do things in this world, guess what? A meaningful life is hard. And the reason people live meaningless lives is not because they want to. It's because it's easier. to be able to figure out that you're going to do something important in this world. And everybody in this room can do something important, Trust me, we all know there are other yeshivas in Israel you could have gone to where nobody would have any expectations of you, But you're in a yeshiva where they are dorish from you, and they expect you to grow and to become great. And the question is, what are you going to do with that greatness? I was teaching Mesilas Yesharim in a seminary once. And the first year, this girl, after the first semester, she said, I had my whole life planned out when I came here. Everything. I knew where I was going to live, what I was going to do. I had everything. And after a half a year in this course, I'm disgusted by the person I almost became. And then she paused and she said, and the odds are I'm going to do it anyway. Because as Winston Churchill said, man occasionally stumbles upon the truth, but he usually picks himself up and keeps going, So everyone here every now and then knows I'm capable of doing something important, but it's hard and I don't want to. So I'd rather just take care of myself instead of worrying about everybody else. So if a Kodesh Baruch Hu believes that you have capabilities, he's going to give you the tools that you need. So I'll give you an example. I knew this girl whose mother was a frum woman, but she wasn't really. And at some point, she just had enough of it, and she ran away and abandoned the family. Her father was a very difficult person. And he said to this girl, okay, your mom left, you're in charge now. You're the mother. You're going to do all the cooking and the cleaning and the shopping. And she was a very positive person, and she didn't complain. She took care of everything. But she had a dream. She was going to go to Israel to a very high-level seminary. Now, you need 99 average to get into this place, and they don't give you any scholarships, which means she's going to have to get the money for the tuition. Her father's not giving her any. Pay for her airfare, for her expenses while she's in Israel. She has to take care of the entire house and keep up her grades. So this was in 9th grade. The next 4 years, she had an unbelievable regimen. She would take care of she'd go to school, she'd come home, she would take care of the house. She would work every night and every weekend as a waitress for a caterer and save every penny. She didn't spend anything on her own. And she did this 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade, took care of the house, kept up her marks. That was it. Finally, she's in 12th grade. She's got all the money saved up. She's got top grades. She goes in for the interview. They turn her down. She is devastated. And she calls me up, and I said, this doesn't make any sense. I know the guy who's the head of the seminary. I'll call him. I call him up, and he says, Orlofsky, you got any good girls for me? I said, I have the best. He says, who? I give him the name. He goes, what? It's the worst girl I ever interviewed. I said, can't be. It can't be. I know this girl. She's a tzaddikish, and I use that term lightly. She's a wonderful girl. Says, look, I'm leaving for Israel tonight, but I'll let Rabbi so-and-so re-interview her. I said, fine. So I tell the girl, I got you another interview. And I go in, and I sit with her. She was the worst interviewee ever, ever. The first question, and you all know this question because you're all here in Israel, why do you want to come to this seminary? Because I'm looking for a place where I can grow. Everybody says the same exact thing, There's one head of a seminary told me after the 8th girl said that, I said, why, what's wrong with you now? Nothing. Then what do you want to do? I don't know. Why are you doing this to me? But everyone knows the answer, You don't say, I want to do it because it's close to town and I can hang out with my friends. You don't say that. So he says, why do you want to come to the seminary? He goes, it's near my grandmother's house. No. And it was downhill from there, Fine. She leaves the room. She was just so unbelievably nervous. She said all kinds of stupid things. She went to be sick, afterwards, And the guy looks at me and says, this is a put on, right? And I said, listen, she's a great girl. She doesn't interview well. On my say-so, take her. He goes, all right, I'll do it on your say-so. So I call her up. I said, congratulations, you're in. She says, because of you, right? I said, well, of course, my recommendation carried weight. She says, no, if it wasn't for you, they wouldn't have taken me, right? Now, I'm a rabbi. Rabbis don't like direct questions. We usually give a mashal, there was a king, We do whatever we can to try to distract. Anyway, she starts crying. She says, I had only one dream. Why did this happen to me? So I said, I'll tell you why. Because you want to help people, and one day you'll be able to help people because this happened to you. It was a little lame, but I made it up on the spot. It was the best I could come up with, and fine. She goes off to seminary. She's a star. She, ended up going into social work, to be able to work with people, etc. Years later, I get a phone call. She goes, it happened just like you said it happened. I said, who is this? I thought it was only me. I would always just call and start talking, taking it for granted that everyone knew who I was. And like a minute into the conversation, people say, who is this? So after that, I would always, whenever I called anybody, I'd say, Shalom, this is Dovid Orlofsky calling from Eretz Yisrael. And my mother would say, I know who you are, So I'm not taking any chances, Mom, I said, who is this? She says, oh, it's so-and-so. I said, oh my gosh, that's so great. What's going on? What are you talking about? Because you remember you told me when, I didn't get into seminary, it was because that way I'd be able to help somebody? And I said, no, I have no recollection of this conversation at all, So I don't remember half the things I say, I was once, when I was teaching in seminary, they had a board where they'd put up the quote of the week. And one week I happened to be there. They had a quote from me. I have no recollection of ever saying it. I was like, that's brilliant, So now I say it over in the name of the board because I don't remember saying it, So I said, no. She goes, you told me that I went through this so I could help somebody. Well, a girl came in today and nobody could help her. She was just hysterical, and they ran through everybody. They gave her over to me. And I said, let me help you. And she says, you can't help me. You can never understand what I'm going through. I said, try me. She says, do you know what it's like to have a dream and never have it fulfilled? And she says, yeah, I do. And the girl stopped. She was suicidal. It was a whole story. The girl stopped. She looked at me and says, I believe you do. And I was able to help that girl. And I said, was it worth it? She says, 100%. Because she understood now that this was the training, this was the basic training she was getting, so when she was in the trenches, she'd be able to help. I'll tell you a terrible story, because everyone loves terrible stories. Woody Allen once said, I want to leave you with a positive idea, but I don't have one, so I'll give you 2 negative ones instead, Anyway, there was this woman. She was a wife of a Rosh Kollel, actually, and she had a lot of problems in her life. And she says, I feel like God pushes me and pushes me, waits for me to fall, and then laughs at me. Yikes, what a terrible picture. Here's this poor little woman, and this giant hand is pushing her until she falls down, and then you hear, ho, 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 ho. Now, I could tell her she's wrong, but I made that mistake the first time I taught in a seminary. I had taught in boys' yeshivas, and you don't have to worry about hurting guys' feelings because, at least back then, guys didn't have any feelings, you know what I mean? So, you just every now and then smack them by the head, and everybody understood, so that was fine. But the first time I taught in a seminary, I asked a question, a girl gave an answer, and I said, no, that's wrong. And the whole place went quiet. And she said, how can you say that to me? You just invalidated me. I said, what are you, a parking meter? I'll put in another quarter, Well, that was it. I lost the whole room. Forget about it. You know how girls think that you can't see them talking when they do this? That was so disgusting. He's supposed to be a rabbi. I've never seen anything. I said, okay, I'm sorry. It was too late. I lost the whole room. I never recovered. So after that, it didn't matter what anybody says. I say, that's an interesting idea. I'm looking, for something else, like the right answer. You know what I mean? Didn't matter what anybody said. I was like, oh, that's an interesting answer. I'm looking for something different where God doesn't send down his only son to die on the cross for us. But, not that I'm invalidating your answer. I'm just looking for that, So I could tell her that it's not true, but that's not going to help, So I said, I have a bunch of little kids, and they all had to learn how to walk, right? So they basically crawl, and then at some point, they get up and they stagger around like Frankenstein, and then they finally start walking. And then, they usually fall down a lot, But finally, they take those first 2 steps, and they stagger, and they take 1 step and 2 steps, and they fall down. And what do the parents do? Yay! And the kid says, these people are sick. They wait for me to fall down, then they laugh and cheer. So we're not cheering because the kid fell down. We're cheering because they took 2 steps. And eventually they're going to learn how to walk and how to run and how to dance and how to play. And if a parent never wants the kid to learn how to walk and keeps scooping them up, it's going to be a little embarrassing when they're 35 and their mother has to carry them into work. Can you get me a coffee? Never mind, I can crawl over to the walking machine, the coffee machine, I keep it on the floor, is that purpose? Don't you want to learn how to walk? You're going to have to learn how to fall down. It's part of the growth process. I said, God's not laughing at you, He's cheering that you succeeded. And life is all about overcoming challenges after challenges, and each time you do, you grow. Those are the growing pains, you become better. Okay. So sometimes something happens and we think it's bad and it really isn't. And sometimes something bad is happening, but it's growing pains. It's what we need. Now, there's a third approach. I'm going to put it like this. What if there's something wrong in your life? There's something wrong. As it happens, you have not achieved the level of Nevuah. And we don't have any Nevi'im around anymore. When you had Nevi'im, it was great, Shaul lost his donkeys, and he says, I bet there's a Navi around here someplace. He'll tell us why we lost the donkeys. Anything that happens, you can go to a Navi. He'll tell you why. We don't have a Nevi'im today. We don't have any prophecy. So if something's going wrong and God wants to send you a message, what can He do? Something taps you on the shoulder, and you ignore it. So He gives you a little push. Ignore it. He shakes you a little bit. Yeah? Why? Because He's trying to get your attention and tell you that something is wrong in your life. There's a story with famous Rosh Hashiva of Eitz Chaim, where he was meeting with a boy, and his wife gives a scream from the kitchen. He runs in, and the two of them grab their coats and they run out. And they come back. Yeah. And they come back after a while. So the boy says, what was that all about? He goes, yeah, it's not important. He says, come on, you left me here. You could at least tell me what happened. So if Issa Zalman Meltzer says, my wife gave a scream from the kitchen because the milk boiled over. And the milk never boiled over to her before. That was an unusual thing. And she knew that there was a message here. And we tried to figure out what it was. And then we realized that back then they used to have milkmen who would come and literally deliver the milk bottles to your door. Yeah? So when the milkman came, she didn't have any money to pay him because I had the money. So we ran down to Tenuva and found out where he lived, and we paid him his money, and he was so thankful because those were the grushim he was going to use to buy a loaf of bread for his family to have for supper. And that's all they could afford. I thought when I heard this story, it's so amazing because what do we say? No sense crying over spilt milk. So the milk boils over and we say, well, that's no big deal. Okay, I break the oven. Oh, great, I never liked that oven. I burn down the kitchen. Oh, I get to remodel. Okay, what do I have to do to get your attention? I asked the crowd once, I said, how bad does something have to be for you to question God? Someone dies, major illness, my house burns down, major car crash. I said, that's too bad, because let's say God wants to get your attention, and you say, listen, God, I'm ignoring everything unless you kill somebody I love, kill somebody I love, do something terrible to me. Otherwise, I have a little magnet on my refrigerator that says, don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. So I have to keep ramping it up. The Gemara says, how bad does something have to be for you to question God? If you stub your finger, you put down your finger and you hit your finger and you say, why did that happen? There's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason. Because God is all-powerful. He could have stopped me from stubbing my finger. Those of you who drive, there have been times that you almost got into an accident, right? And it was mamish. You don't even know what happened. You were changing lanes and someone beeped at you and you stopped and you saw you almost smashed into somebody. It was like, you can't even explain it. You were this close. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu could pull you out of a mess anytime that he wants. He could solve any problem that he wants. So if something happens, says the Gemara, Yapash Rish Ramasa, figure out, why did this happen to me? There's got to be a reason. So that anything that happens in my life, if I sweat the small stuff, I won't have to sweat the big stuff. But if I keep ignoring everything, then I'm just tempting God to keep ramping it up until he gets my attention. There was a fellow, I had met him once. I did not know his story. Rav Noach Weinberg tells his story. I met this fellow. He was graduating in the University of Chicago with honors. He was on the fast track. He was athletic. He was good looking. He was popular with the girls. He had, all of this earning potential ahead of him. His life was golden. And what happened? A black militant came onto his campus and wanted to shoot a white guy, didn't care who. He picked him at random, shot him. The bullet lodged in his spine. He was a quadriplegic. Couldn't move anything from the neck down. Hit his spine. Inoperable. He tells the story. Noach says, I've heard the story. I've heard him. He tells the story. And I afterwards met people who went to him for Shabbos, and he tells the story. He was lying in the hospital bed, and he says, what's the point of life? I can't play sports. I probably will never get married. I'm never going to hold down a job. I'm practically a vegetable. I can't scratch my own nose. I can't do anything. Why am I alive? And he stops. He was a smart guy. And he stops and he says, do you realize I never asked that question in my entire life? Why am I alive? I would have lived my life successfully, died, and never known why I was alive. And then he said, I thought to myself, it's a good thing that I got shot. Because I don't think anything short of this would have made me stop and think as to why I'm alive. I would have just picked myself up and kept going. What an insight that I understand that I was so out of touch that it took something that dramatic. But imagine if every time something happens to you, you can sit down and think, why did this happen? Now, and I here to cast any aspersions. If you're a Navi, then you're in a good shape. If you're not a Navi, then you don't know why. You can only guess. Well, we know that the Mishnah in Saita says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does everything midah keneged midah. So you can assume that there must be, something that applies to it. So that if someone opened the door and smacked me in the mouth and I split my lip, I don't know if it's because I'm not giving enough tzedakah, especially if I was in the middle of telling a juicy piece of Lashon Hara at the moment. I don't know. It could be. I'm not a Navi. It could be that it really is what happened. There's not, a direct relation to everything. But if I have to sit down and think about it, I have to try to figure out as best I could. And that's what I do in my life when something happens. I ask myself, why did this happen? There's a story with Reb Chatzkel, who is the Mashgiach in Panovich, and he tripped, and he rolled down the steps and crashed through a glass. And as he's lying there bleeding, he says, I know why this happened. I know why this happened. That's pretty good. But Moshe Feinstein was being wheeled in for surgery, and he had already been sedated. And Reb Dovid said, as I'm staying with him as they bring him into the operating room, I hear under his breath, Tafshin Lamed Gimel, Tafshin Lamed Beis, Tafshin Lamed Aleph, Tafshin Lamed, and he finally drifted off. I don't know what that was. When he recovered, I said, what was that? He says, you heard that? I thought I was talking to myself. I realized that whatever this illness is, it's affecting my learning. So it can't be Yisurim Shal Ava. I must have done something wrong, that I'm getting, a reminder for. So I reviewed my whole life to see where I had done something wrong. He says, did you find it? He says, yeah, when I was bar mitzvah. Me, I don't have that problem. I would go 7:01 and 50 seconds, 7:01 and 40. Oh, there it is. I don't have to go back that far. But when something happens, and I assume that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving me a message, because understand, the easiest thing in the world to do as a parent is to ignore your kids. and tell them, you know what? You don't have to go to school. You don't have to go to sleep. You don't have to bathe. You don't have to brush your teeth. Eat all the candy you want. I don't care what you do. That's a form of child abuse. That's called neglect. Now take your kid away. Because a parent who says, oh, let him do whatever he wants, is basically saying, I don't care about you. And so when you say, I don't care about you, Rabbi Leff told the story when he was a Rav down in Miami. So he went to visit somebody from his shul in the hospital. And one of the nurses said, listen, there's a young man here who tried to kill himself. He's not of your church, but maybe you could speak with him. So I said, what's the matter? And he says, this morning my father called me into his office. He handed me the keys to a new sports car. He handed me the keys to a condo on the beach. He handed me a credit card with $5,000 a month limit. And Rabbi Leff said, and you want to kill yourself? So give it to me and, solve the problem. He said, you don't understand. My father's getting remarried to a woman who doesn't want any children around. I get all of this on one condition, that I never come back again. And sent me away. I get everything, but I don't want to see you. If nothing bad happens to you in 30 days, you have to worry that maybe God forgot about you. Baruch Hashem, I know that my file is open on his desk and he thinks about me all the time, because not a day goes by that I don't see something happening, But a Kodesh Baruch Hu does not want to see you waste your life. And he's going to keep pushing you and pushing you until you say, what? What? What do you want from me? He says, now we're having a conversation. You understand? Let's figure out how your life could be better. Now, how do you do this? I can't tell you. I'll give you a few examples. This girl says, all right, I was after one of these classes. This girl says, okay, explain this to me. I broke my broke my right arm 3 times while roller skating. And I fell and I broke my right arm. 2 times was at my birthday party, and 1 time was at, my brother's birthday party. So I said, okay, that's an easy one. You're a klutz, and you shouldn't be roller skating. You know what I'm saying? Someone once came to Shlomo Zalman, their little toddler fell out of their window and fell down several stories and landed on bushes and wasn't hurt. So he went to Shlomo Zalman and says, what is God trying to tell me? He says, he wants you to put in window bars. I think that's a pretty easy one, I said, you're a klutz. She says, no, I'm semi-professional. I compete. I do flips and I do this and I do that. I've never fallen ever roller skating except these 3 times at birthday parties, and each time I broke my right arm. Right, that's spooky already, So I said, look, I'm not a prophet. I don't know. But if it was me, here's how I'd work through it. Are you somebody who enjoys giving or taking more? There are different types of people, yeah? She goes, I'm always uncomfortable taking. I much rather give. I like to give. I said, so here comes your birthday, which is an important day in your life. According to Judaism, your birthday is a Yom HaDin, because Kol HaChola brings din every beginning. I said, and on your birthday, you dafka made it a skating party? So everybody can look at you, look at me, my cake, my presents, me, and you go out there, and you're skating and showing off? Your right arm represents chesed. And each time you did this, you broke your right arm because you took away your ability to give. What I would suggest is for your next birthday, first of all, don't make it a skating party. Second of all, tell people in lieu of a gift, give a check to a tzedakah. Pick a tzedakah that's meaningful to you. And make out the checks. And collect the checks and maybe have someone there from the tzedakah come and receive it. So you took a day of getting and turned into a day of giving. She says, oh my gosh, that's such a brilliant idea. I always felt uncomfortable with these skating parties and with my presents. I'm going to do that. I said, whoa, slow down. I'm not a party planner, okay? I said, that's how I would look at it. Does that make sense to you? She says, yes. And then I said, was it worth breaking your arm 3 times for this? And she says, oh, absolutely. So I told over this story once in Discovery, and a guy comes up to me at the end, and he had this sort of angry look on his face the whole time. And he says, okay, Rabbi, see if you can explain this. My father, his whole life, he was a very athletic person. He played every sport. And then at some point he got, I don't know which disease, I don't know if it's Lou Gehrig's disease or which disease it was, and he's losing control of his body. And I moved in to help him, but he doesn't want me to help him. He's a very proud person, and I'm lying in bed, and I hear him get up at night, and he falls to the ground, and I want to run out and help him, but I know he'll get upset at me, and he pulls himself up and drags himself to the bathroom. Why is God putting my father through this? Now, how do I know? I don't know his father. I don't know anything about him. But okay, so you ask a few questions, I said, well, how's your mom handling it? He says, my mom's not in the picture. They've been divorced for a long time. I said, why? He says, because he said that my father never cared about a marriage or a relationship. All he cared about was sports. I said, well, does he have anybody in his life now? And he says, it's funny. He went to a support group of people of this disease and met a woman who has the same disease. And I finally felt that he had somebody in his life that I could come to Israel for a visit. And before I left, he said to me, for the first time in my life, I'm in love. I said, so what's more important, playing sports or being in love? Because if he was still playing sports, he never would have found love. So he thought that was a good answer, but he was fast. And he goes, but what about me? Why am I going through this? Now, that happens to be a great question, because when a tragedy happens, it hits everybody, right? It says, why was Dinah attacked by Shechem? And Rashi brings two answers. One is from Yaakov's point of view, and one is from Dinah's point of view, because when a tragedy hits, it hits the parents, it hits the children, it hits their brothers and sisters, it hits the community. He goes, why am I going through this? I said, listen, I've run a lot of these seminars, and I meet a lot of guys. And I've never met anybody who is as serious about life as you are. He says, well, you don't go through something like this without forced to grow up and stop acting like a stupid kid. I said, so that means you're going to live a different kind of life. You're going to take your marriage more seriously, your relationships more serious, your decisions in life more seriously. And for the first time in 2.5 days, he smiled. He thought that was a good answer. Now, I used to give a rabbinical training course, and at the end, I would do an evaluation. And they said, the best part of your course is you talk about your failures. Everyone talks about their successes. A person called me up, heard me talk about this once on a tape, and says, okay, explain this to me. All the glasses in our house are breaking. I said, well, maybe it's a bad set. No, all different sets. All different things. I said, well, maybe you guys are klutzes. He says, no, it breaks all the time. Look, somebody was just pouring orange juice and the glass just broke. I said, okay, you need an exorcist. This is outside of my pay grade. I can't explain. I gave a couple of possibilities and they said, no, none of that makes sense. So I don't know. I can't do this all the time. But whenever anything happens in your life, it's an opportunity for you to say one of three things. Maybe this is not really bad. Maybe I'm in the middle of the story and I have to look at the knot of the tefillin at the end. Or maybe I'm going through this because at the end I'm going to be a much better person than I was beforehand. Scar tissue is stronger than healthy tissue. And sometimes I got to go through what I have to go through. And maybe it's because there's something wrong in your life and God will not give up on you. Like that boy in the story with Rabbi Leff, where he's not prepared to write you off. He's going to keep chasing you because he knows you can do something great in this world. And when we look at it, the problem with suffering is when people say, I suffered for nothing. But if you know that your suffering has meaning, and that you turn around and I'm able to use this to do something meaningful when that wake-up call comes. I'll end with one last story. There was a Rabbi Kimchi who was teaching in Discovery. His brother was a rabbi in London in Ner Israel Shul. But this was his brother. And he told the story that I just found mind-blowing. He was in the Yom Kippur War. And the Yom Kippur War, people do not appreciate how close we came to destruction. It came out later that Golda Meir and her cabinet were carrying cyanide tablets to commit suicide rather than get captured. They were sure this was the end of the state of Israel. It was terrible. We were out of ammunition. If General Haig hadn't made an emergency airlift, we would have just literally not have bullets. It was unbelievable. So he was in a tank corps. Now, the Syrians had the latest Russian tanks with like night vision. Ours didn't. So he says, we settled down for the night, and suddenly a shell comes over. And we realized we couldn't see them, but the Syrians were in the next field and they could see us. So the commander says, evasive maneuvers. And we all started our tanks, and he goes, forget it, we're not going to be able to get away. Just hunker down and hope for the best. He says, for the next hour, it rained shells. And these were armor-piercing shells. I spoke to somebody who was in the Rabbanut that afterwards goes to collect the bodies. That's what my son-in-law does in the army, and he was one of the people who had to clean out El Shifa Hospital. He's still traumatized from it. But he says, when one of these missiles hit a tank, there was nothing to collect. It was just ashes. There was nothing left. He says, and the shells are raining down. He says, I'm waiting at any minute to die. And finally it stops, the barrage stops. And my radio crackles. And the commander says, casualties report in. Nothing. And he says again, please, any casualties report in. Total silence. He says, if there's any damage, report in. The radio crackles. And the person says, the door of our half-track got blown off. Anyone injured? No. He says, I couldn't take it anymore. I lifted up the turret of the tank and I look across the field. And all across the field, every tank is raising its turret. They missed all of us. All around us, the ground was pockmarked. They didn't hit one tank. We literally fell out of the tanks laughing. We couldn't believe it. No, a miracle, not a siyata d'shmaya. It was a miracle. He says, that morning, you could imagine. I was the only religious guy in this whole tank division. There wasn't one other religious guy. He says, that morning, I put on my tefillin. You can imagine the kavanah I had. And someone gives me a tap on the shoulder. He goes, no, kimchi, yalla. I thought, we're moving out already? Everybody lined up to put on my tefillin. Every single secular person in that tank car knew they lived through a miracle. So I said, so what happened? Nothing. Everybody went back to their regular lives. They got a big tap on the shoulder. Yeah. Man will occasionally stumble upon the truth, but they usually pick themselves up and keep going. When something happens to us, we have to look at our life and say, why did this happen to me? Maybe it's really good and I don't realize it. Maybe it's a growth experience. And maybe there's something in my life I need to change. This is the tap in the shoulder. Pay attention to the tap in the shoulder before, God forbid, something more serious happens. If we sweat the small stuff, we won't have to sweat the small stuff. But you can be sure that all the tzaddikim in this room, you can be sure that God will never let you alone to live a meaningless life. He will keep tapping because he wants to see everybody in this room go on to greatness. Thank you very much.